and now we're having to pick all of those up, and really bummed about that. But I think it also provides us with another way to be creative with what we do have. And we are actually, tomorrow we are starting our production of an app. It's through Culture Connect, and they're a really great resource if you haven't checked them out. They have lots of online tutorials even if you don't use the app. So we're going to start working with them on creating an app to replace essentially those things in our museum that are touch-based. So we have things like interactive like question circles that, you know, families like to get together and move the circles and there's a question and it's kind of like a true or false type of thing. Well, so we're going to have to transfer that over onto the app. I think it'll actually work really nicely because the app will work within our physical space. So it's not so much a substitution, but once we are back in our physical building, it will actually work in tandem with the exhibitions themselves. So really, it's odd because we're having to kind of backpedal from this trend that we've seen in museums with, you know, we were always pushing interactives and getting feedback from visitors, you know, through the written word or pictures or things like that. We have to rethink and change up how we interact with our visitors in that way.
I just saw a question pop up for you, Mattie. And Mattie, do you want to unshare your screen? Or?
Oh, yeah. How do I do that?
I think you go to view options. No, wait.
There should be a small bar. Oh, there you go.
There's a little button. It's a green button at the bottom of the screen.
I just did it.
And I'll unshare it.
Yeah, it's done. You did.
You're good.
Oh, good. Okay.
So the question that came up for you is, what online exhibition platform did you use for the CATS exhibit?
So we used Portfolio, which is part of the Adobe Cloud. And I think you can do 5 different websites, web designs for free. And I think you could actually probably do this through something like Wix. I haven't tried that, but we used Portfolio for this one.
And a couple people just asked about Culture Connect. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? That's, you know, the next thing that we were going to talk about anyway. So
sure. So I'm not an expert on it, seeing as I couldn't even unshare my screen. But I will try my best. So what we are working with is actually, it's for small museums. It's their package specifically for small museums, and they're offering a really nice discount right now. So we are actually able to put this into motion this year. This was something that we were going to work towards, but with this promotion that they're doing because of COVID-19, we're actually able to launch this, which it's really nice too because we have a lot of time at home right now. We are able to put together this content. We all work from laptops anyway, so we already have, like I have our collections database with me. We have the images, we have all of the content that we actually need. So Culture Connect is let's see if I can get this right. It's a web-based app. So what's great about it for me is that they take care of all of the, you know, like back-end stuff, like supporting the app, making sure that all bugs are, you know, taken care of. So I'm not like write code or anything, because that would not happen. And so what, and then let's see, they also have a kind of templates that you can go through and create different mobile guides. They also have, if you want to like go up to the next step, they have like touch points where you can take an object and really explode it, so to speak, so you can explore different aspects of like an image. It's a really neat platform, I guess you could say, and they're very user friendly, which I like because, you know, the technology thing, it's a real issue.
Sure. And I really see moving forward that we're going to probably be implementing a lot of these types of things. in our exhibitions, seeing as how, and the next topic that I have to touch on is, so many of us use digital tools in our exhibitions to supplement information. And, you know, we're either removing those now or coming up with exhaustive cleaning procedures. And some of us use them quite a bit more than others. But Lindsay, do you want to speak a little bit to how you see that shifting in the Historic New Orleans collection?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually not sure what exactly is going to happen. I did talk to people the other day, and there's still a lot up in the air. But yeah, in terms of the digital interactives, you mean, or just exhibit design?
The digital interactives, because I know y'all use a lot in your exhibitions.
Yeah, we have most of our information about all of our objects is on iPads. Right now, the plan is to just clean them. I think that there are a lot of creative solutions that we can work with outside of that, but I'm not sure if that's going to be implemented or not. We have been talking about, in terms of, and maybe this is jumping the gun, but we have been talking about ways of social distancing within the exhibits. But yeah, in terms of the interactives, that's the plan as of now. I think that we were talking before about having more of your own personal devices, but of course that's in the category of accessibility. If you have a smartphone or not, which many people do, but some people don't. So what do you do in that situation? How much money do you have to do a printed piece, or can you just have you know, a printed takeaway? And kind of working with the public in terms of what their accessibility is with technology, and if they would want something to take with them, or if you give them a website to look at later that maybe you can have more of an experience with at a later date after you've had your experience with the actual physical objects.
Awesome. Kim, do you have anything to interject about digital tools or interactives in our spaces, or how you're going to deal with the shop? Things.
You know what? I would just say that I'm sort of inspired at, I think as like professionals, we all were accustomed to like producing these really refined, I don't know, experiences, but I've been really inspired by all of the content kind of coming out of Instagram, and there's just a lot of ways to do things kind of not like quick and dirty, but like I think with a lot less resources. And I think part of the culture of Instagram and sort of apps like that is like embracing this kind of do it yourself. And I think that that maybe the field could like take a cue from people that are, you know, using it to sell stuff, or to document their artistic processes, and just not make everything so complicated, and just use what we have, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's definitely a moment that our creativity is exploding in so many different ways, or, you know, being hampered in a few different ways, but definitely exploding. Mattie, do you have anything to add about your interactives, just your physical interactives, other than you remove them all?
So what we're trying to do is to translate those onto the app. So hopefully, and I think I forgot to mention this, but the app is all on your phone. Like it's not even, it doesn't have to be downloaded off of like iTunes Store, which I always hate when they have to do that. It's just a link that's provided. People can click it on your website and then go through the museum and then just log out of that as soon as they leave. So we're really trying to translate all of those physical interactives onto the digital platform, especially those things that have worked really well for the museum. And a lot of them, you know, are fairly simple. And I think that's, like Kim said, that's the great thing that we've learned, is that we don't have to be completely polished and perfect all the time. That's always nice when that happens, but I think people are really responding well to like the authenticity of just seeing these nameless, you know, faceless names behind the closed doors. I think they're really responding well to that.
For sure. And I'll just say, so I've done, in the last 2 years, I've done a lot of experimenting with different types of audio in our spaces. I installed a soundscape in one of our historic houses that's all motion censored. And I foresee myself being asked to do a lot more of that for our exhibitions, perhaps, you know, in place of physical labels. You know, you don't want people gathering around labels anymore. Maybe, you know, an audio option, not something that you necessarily have to carry on your device, but something that's triggered in the space will be something that we'll be moving more towards. I guess we'll see. But yeah, so Lindsay, do you want to talk about how y'all are talking about social distancing with the patrons?
Yeah, and also back to the label issue, we had also talked yesterday, my team and me, about what labels could look like more in three-dimensional space, creating something that has its own stand so that you don't have to kind of crowd into a corner to look at it. So that was something that somebody put out there that I thought was interesting. We've also been talking about what type of graphics we could use on the walls in order to indicate space and how far away to be from people, or if it's like, you know, that this section is for one person, and then kind of reorganizing the way that we show with some graphic element on the wall that says, you know, this area is for this object's for one person to look at a time, and distancing those things. We are also, I think a lot of people are talking about timing and how many people you're going to let into a gallery at a time. And then also, you know, kind of part of the thing about being in the French Quarter, and I think being a museum in general, is that people kind of come in on a whim.
You turn that down a bit, Mama.
And so you don't really want to stop people from being able to do that. Of course, the French Quarter is a little bit more conducive to that because there's so much else you can go do and come back if you want to get a time ticket. But I think everyone's going to have it in their mind that, you know, everything's going to have to be a little bit more scheduled. So hopefully time tickets will be in place. And then we were talking before when we had all talked about doing something like a restaurant buzzer that could say, hey, your time's up in this gallery. I don't know what that actually looks like, but I think something in that realm could be fun to discuss as a way that you don't have to be as authoritative and kind of, you know, come in and be the rule master of the room. You can kind of let people just know gently that it's time to move on to the next part of the museum. So those are some ideas that we've been talking about.
Awesome. Mattie, what about y'all?
We've been really just kind of spitballing to see what would work within our spaces. We usually have, you know, like kind of waves of people that come in, especially with families. And we are a small museum, so it's going to be really difficult to actually keep, you know, social distancing within our small gallery spaces. Something as simple as like putting up a sign that says, you know, just be mindful of how long you're in a certain space, I think could really help people just to be mindful of like, oh, you know what, somebody else would probably like to see this space now. And then directing traffic so that maybe we just have like one loop of the museum, which I hate to do that to people because I hate to limit their experience. But unfortunately, we're just having to reorganize how we do business for the time being.
Kim, thoughts?
I don't have any thoughts to add. I think those are all great ideas, but there's a couple questions in the chat box. Someone's asking about for picking up works, for artists coming in and picking up works, like say a show comes down. I think that's what they're talking about. Do you guys have any input on that?
I do. So like I said before, I've sort of been creating this this document about how we're going to function as exhibits people and interact with loans and conservators and each other. One of the things that I am trying to implement in that document is staging areas in all of our buildings. So we have 5 buildings in the French Quarter, and on top of that a storage facility. So we have 6 buildings in the French Quarter. But I want to implement, a very detailed procedure for, you go to this place, the staging area is, through the door to the left, 10 steps, like leave that thing there, text me that it's there. That's sort of what I'm working towards now. I'll also be the exhibits person that will be dealing with a lot of this, picking up and dropping off objects. So, it's going to be a little bit learn as I go. I actually do have to pick up some objects next week for the Sports Hall of Fame exhibition we have opening June 26th. And I've been discussing with that person, she's gonna put a table out in front of her front door and leave the objects there, and then I'm gonna come by, pack them, and take them with me. So that's where I'm headed with that whole thing. Lindsay, what about y'all? Do you have any?
Sorry?
Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think that nothing's written in stone right now. It is all just spitballing, and honestly, I've come up with more answers with this group than I have with the institution, unfortunately. But that doesn't mean that those things can't transfer at some point to the higher ups. But yeah, what were we talking about?
Moving objects.
Sorry. The question came about if it says a large number of artists need a pickup works, and it sounds like some sort of appointment.
Yeah.
Or it seems like that might be a way.
I keep thinking about art handling, because we also had that conversation yesterday of, what's going to be our protocol? Are we going to work in teams? And that might be jumping the gun too. But yeah, in terms of loans and things of that nature, I think it's really just the 3-day rule, maybe a little bit long. Just quarantine the object in a specific location. We thankfully have an offsite storage facility that allows for us to have some larger spaces to put things off to the side. So we will probably be putting up signage that says don't work with this object until this date, just as a reminder.
Awesome. Mattie, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I don't really have anything for the picking up of artwork. That seems like it's a little bit more difficult, but we are going to be installing a show at the end of May, actually. And Cassandra, we're pretty much doing the same thing that y'all are, where we'll have a designated point and the artists will drop off their works. They've already sent in their loan agreements. And so they'll just pretty much give me a call, say, hey, it's here. Luckily we do have nitrile gloves, in large demand, supply. And so, we'll just go and put those kind of in a quarantined spot. So yeah, it's not, thankfully it hasn't been too big of an issue for us. Something that I'm really trying to do at this point is to make use of the time when our museum is closed. So, artists aren't interacting with any of the guests when they're dropping off artwork or picking up. So really you are limiting that contact, which is what, people keep saying is the most important thing there. So, and then, we also have the noise and construction of putting up a new exhibition. So that's, we're making use of a bad situation.
Yeah, it's definitely the best time to install a show.
Yeah, I would agree. I would also just like to add from my position and, whom I have to deal with and work with on the daily, I'm really trying to manage expectations about how things are just going to take a lot longer now. Installing exhibitions is going to take a lot longer. We're, going to go down to a skeleton crew. Part of what I have written in our policies and procedures that travel should be done solo. Any object that requires more than 2 people to move not at a social distance should be scaled back from an exhibition for now. Things like that. So things are going to really take a lot longer. And I know that leadership and administration, that's something they absolute hate hearing, but it's something that I've been saying a lot. Yeah, oh, go ahead.
No, it's just, I was just thinking about, since I was thinking about art handling already and we had talked about it, we had talked about working in teams of 2. We only have 4 people on our prep team right now. We usually have a contractor, but that's not going to be happening right now. But I think if we are just kind of thinking in terms of, this is my partner and we are, trust each other and we communicate with each other and, work as best as we can not to expose ourselves to anyone else, then that can be kind of as if that person's a part of your household, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. Yeah. Kim, do you have anything, or is there anything else, any questions that are popping up?
It seems like people are talking about, you had talked about with me earlier, Cassandra, texts, people not sending texts. Do you want to touch on that for a second?
Text messages?
No, like text to install when the exhibition comes with texts, and how the texts are no longer traveling with the work.
Like a guide that travels with work? I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
A technician? Sorry.
Oh, text. Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry, I was about to jump in to explain it, but you got it.
I got it. Sorry. Yeah, so there are so many different ways that people are dealing with this. Most everybody that I've talked to is stopping couriers at this point. Couriers are not going anywhere. For traveling exhibitions, some people are, not going to be sending texts with their traveling exhibitions, and they're going to have to come up with, new manuals about how to install those and really troubleshoot that as they're going. Other people are talking about what Lindsay was talking about. You have a team of 2 or 3 people that you work with, and those are the people that you work with. Those are the people that you travel with. I was on the AAM 10 webinar this morning, and people were talking about, it really comes back to this this issue of trust for me. When a team of 4 goes out on the road to install something, they are not hanging out in public spaces. They are not eating in restaurants. They are not going to get their hair done. They are, respecting their colleagues and trying to keep everybody safe that they have to be close with.
Tool sharing was something we had talked about, trying to minimize that as much as possible and trying to clean. Obviously just keeping up with washing your hands, and if you have some way to sanitize or just clean off the tools before you pass them on. But yeah, it adds to the timing of everything.
Oh yeah. And if you don't have a lot of experience in writing those kinds of manuals, one of the other things that I included in our policies and procedures is like cross training people. There are a lot of people that work in our facilities that don't have art handling experience, and now they need to be trained 100%. So people need to be able to do more exhibits and art handling work, seeing as how we can't, I can't go everywhere with everyone now. Yeah, Mattie, do you have anything to add?
I had to unmute. I was just considering some of the questions that had popped up. There was one about somebody being nervous about coming back into the galleries to work, and I think we just have to, respect that at this point. If somebody doesn't feel comfortable in their workplace, then they're not going to do a good job. Like, we have to just kind of make concessions for that. I think we're also going to have to just make some changes to how we're going to be doing things, like large objects that require numerous people. If they're not there, they're not available, then maybe that object doesn't get included. So that's kind of what I was thinking about. Also, there's a question about signatures on loan paperwork. Yeah, so the exhibition that's coming in for us is actually a fairly small exhibition, and I have a good relationship with most of the artists, and so they're pretty much like we're sending the paperwork ahead of time, and then once they deliver it, we'll make like eye contact and like, yep, you're here, gotcha, great, but not come into like physical contact that way.
I know that for our registrars, we're going to e-signatures for everything, which we had already really been going to anyway, because, the situations get complicated and that just has to be the way that it is sometimes. So DocuSign, yeah, that's a good one. Well, the next topic I was going to throw out there is something that we've already touched on a little bit, but just how we're going to have to think about designing exhibitions differently in the future, like, not including necessarily large objects. Our spaces are history heavy, and curators really pack objects into those spaces. Yeah, totally. So, I mean,
we were kind of hoping that the outcome of this, if anyone's ever been to the HNOC, it's like we're very famous for overloading our galleries. We're kind of hoping that this might make things a little more minimal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I'm thinking about in working with our curators and historians is, to describe a topic or a concept that they're trying to get across, they might use 4 objects to do that. And like, now we should really think about using 1 or 2. We don't need to use 10 objects necessarily to describe these things anymore. Or at least for now. And then going to something like a museum app or a Culture Connect app to sort of give that excess information will be really valuable. Kim, Mattie, do you have anything to add? Okay. Are there any questions, Kim?
It looks like, was it, someone just sent I don't know if everyone's following the chat box, but a link for e-signatures, and it seems like it's a legally acceptable thing as far as contracts go.
And sorry, I was trying to put a link in there. The Association of Registrars and Collections Specialists have, if you go to their website, there's a whole panel discussion that they recorded from their 2019 annual meeting about e-signatures. I was trying to put that in there, and somehow I put the invite to this Zoom meeting, so ignore what I was doing. But it's a pretty in-depth panel discussion if you have the time to watch it.
Awesome. And then it looks like, this is great, there's something about a safety pledge. Has anyone thought about that? Or I think we talked about that briefly. Cassandra, did we?
Yeah, I think it's a really, really, really great idea. And I think one of the things that the 4 of us have discussed leading up to this is not just the issue of trust, but also the issue of, everyone's emotions are very like raw right now. And people are, I ride an emotional roller coaster every day, and everybody's sort of in that boat. And I think we're going to have to be so much more sensitive to how people are feeling. Like, it's just, not that we aren't usually, but it's just so much deeper now. So I think something like a safety pledge is a great idea. I have not discussed that with my people, but. So we are all thinking about reopening. I'm wondering what sorts of actions that we're going to take for all of our spaces in that couple of weeks leading up to reopening. Mattie, what are you all doing?
So what we're working on right now is putting together, even though we have a very small staff, we have 10 people, and 3 of those are part-time. We have a very small staff. But what we're doing is splitting into different teams that are actually going to head off some of those different areas. So we have things like visitor experience. How are we going to manage that? Ensuring that people are staying 6 feet apart, and still making that a welcoming environment. People who are going to contact the media. Things like new additions to the galleries, like hand sanitizing stands, new things that we're actually offering, like are we offering face masks? So there's a lot of questions right now, and I don't think anybody has like a hard and fast rule. I think it's all a little subjective based on your institution. But right now we're kind of in that planning phase. We aren't planning to open until July 1st here. And so we have a little bit of time, but we're already starting to look at, you know, who's going to be in charge of what aspect of the reopening procedures. And I think that's probably the biggest jump, the biggest hurdle there is, you know, figuring out who is going to spearhead that particular area. Because once you have that clear communication between everybody, then I think, you know, we'll all be on the same page and be able to work forward.
Mattie, that just brought, that just made me think of a question I wanted to ask you. Are you going to change the way that you display anything now that like hand sanitizing stations will be in the gallery and people will have to be further apart? Like, are you going to frame things differently or put more things in cases? I know that your collection is fragile and Walter Anderson didn't always use the greatest materials.
He made my job very difficult. So that's a great question. And so something that we kind of already try and do is to limit how people are able to access the work. But I think also limiting the amount of people in a specific space is really going to help towards that. Because we do have pretty confined spaces. I think once we are able to kind of limit who all is able to come into a space all at once, then we are going to, you know, that's going to kind of mitigate that issue of, you know, preserving the object. But something we're also going to have to change is how much we are actually on the floor. You know, like most of the days, our front desk people will stay up at the front and the rest of us stay in the back of the museum. But now we're actually going to have to start rotating. And Cassandra, and I think we were talking about that earlier, is that, you know, our description of our job is changing because we are no longer able to just stay in the background. We need to be out there on the floor, talking with people, encouraging social distancing, but also playing that role of, you know, what does museum mean? Why are people coming to our institutions? And that's really I think a mental health issue that a lot of people are struggling with right now, is especially with isolation. And I can see after, you know, the ban is lifted that we're going to have a surge of people who are trying to get back to normal. And cultural institutions are really going to be a very big part of that.
I agree. I'd also like to make a note on that. Lots of people that I work with keep referring to getting back to normal, and I'm constantly saying, you know, it will be a new normal. Everything will look different. I understand that people want to get back to some sense of normalcy, but I think it's really important, like you were just saying, Mattie, like my job's going to change so much. It's important to also mitigate that expectation that things will definitely be very different. Lindsay, what about y'all? I mean, do you think you'll have to change the way you were displaying things?
I'm not sure if we're going to change a whole lot than kind of what we've been talking about already. Yeah.
Kim, do you have anything to add about that?
I don't. There is another question, though, about sanitation products that are used in spaces with unframed canvas objects. Does anyone have any information on that, on protecting the objects from those types of chemicals? That's what they are, right? Chemicals?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go for it.
I was just going to say the CCAHA, I can't remember what it stands for, but it is those letters. They have a great list of the different cleaning products that are actually, you can use in collections areas. And, you know, it kind of goes through how you can clean in those areas. Unfortunately, like, I don't know that there is a great alternative to hand sanitizer. And I think people are just going to, that's kind of the placebo effect too, is that they are going to want to lather up their hands in, you know, public spaces. So I think just strategically placing those and really thinking about, you know, where they are placed within our institutions. Is there someone there who is, you know, able to observe? Seems kind of silly to have somebody observe hand sanitizing stations, but that may be where we go. And then also putting it near, you know, things that aren't going to be damaged by the presence of those stations.
Yeah, I just had a thought about how, you know, a lot of people, I mean, it could impact like the bathroom use, and I'm wondering if those like portable, you know, hand washing stations could be used so that it doesn't create like this bottleneck situation. Because then that's also going to cause, you know, people to be in close proximity with each other too, wanting to use the restroom and wash their hands.
That's come up in some other sessions that I've been in about how you're going to deal with bathrooms and the ADA requirements. That is not something that I've discussed with anybody that I work with yet. But yeah, I think also for us, because we are a history institution and we always have so many objects in our exhibitions. In the past, I've pushed so much for, you know, this mutual trust with the public and for a lot less objects to be under glass, and to be more accessible in different ways. And I can definitely see that fight coming with people that are like, well, now, I mean, people are gonna, you know, have hand sanitizer all over their hands. People are gonna be, or maybe they're not washing their hands. Like everything needs to go back to being under glass. And I would like to keep going the path that I'm going, but I'm really gonna have to think about that, the way that I pressure and think about designing that in the future.
Yeah, unfortunately, it goes back to the evolution we've been pushing for in museums with interactives and wanting to be able to have a tactile experience with something, and just having to roll that back. And how can you do that in an interesting way, I think is kind of what we're all trying to get at with that.
Absolutely. And one of the things, you know, that we touched on in a meeting that we had before, the four of us, is trying to create more atmospheric environments using sound, using things that, you know, that aren't object-based. And I mean, this is also a way that our field has been going, is to be less object-based, or minimally object-based. But I mean, this is really going to be a time to experiment with that. Mattie, do you have anything, or Kim, to say about that?
I was going to say, do you have online resources for that exhibition that you curated with the Soundscapes that you could share with us? Because I would, that would be interesting for all of us to see what that looks like.
I don't, but I'm happy to put something together.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, I would love to. Zinnia, I can ask you or talk to you about how to get that out there. But yeah, I can do a video. I work with, for most of the sound work that I do, I work with a company out of Boston called Museum Technology Source Inc. They're fabulous. They are affordable, and they have, you know, tech people that are available to help you with any kind of troubleshooting. And I've used them for maybe 3 projects now, so they're great. And yes, I will make a note to put something together.
There was a question on here about video viewing room, because we had that problem as well. We've decided to just cut it. It's just not worth having people stuck inside one little room, at least, you know, for the foreseeable future. And what we're going to try and do is to put it on our website. So if people want to do kind of some preparation before they come to the museum, they can do that. But in our opinion, it just wasn't worth it to stick, you know, 30 people into one little room all at once.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I just saw something come in through the chat too about masks being required for staff and visitors. We were talking about this in the education webinar, yesterday, the day before, that you have to be really careful about ADA requirements when you're putting some of these things in place. But we are not requiring masks for any of our staff or visitors at this point. although I have made a push in my policies and procedures to require them for our team. All right, so I mean, the last couple of things that I just wanted to touch on are, you know, how we're sort of like getting through this uncertainty at this moment, like, you know, by using humor and taking care of ourselves. I don't know how other people's exhibition schedules are going, but, you know, I'm being asked to push forward as if our schedule has not changed. We have exhibitions opening 2 in June, in 2 different parts of the state. And we're in a very unique situation that all of our offices, all of our teams are run out of New Orleans, but we have to work in parishes across the state, and everybody's on a different curve. And that's been very difficult to sort of figure out what's the best practice for traveling to places that have less cases and all of this kind of stuff. So, yeah, does anybody, Mattie, do you want to touch on your how you're dealing with all of that?
I would love to, and I am going to share my screen again, so be prepared to take me off of this. All right, so my team has completely changed up how we are doing this for the time being. Honestly, until like last week, we didn't know when we were going to open. And so we've really been pushing digital content. And something fun that we did was we put together recreations of Walter Anderson's work. And this was a fun thing for us to do, not only just to laugh at ourselves and have a little bit of fun in a weird situation, but it also engages people with Walter Anderson's artwork, which is part of our mission. And so that was a lot of fun for us. And I think we've had a lot of people who have really enjoyed getting to laugh along with us. I think we're showing our vulnerability a little bit, so we're not necessarily behind the closed doors anymore, which is kind of interesting. Now we're behind a screen, but we're more accessible than ever, which is kind of weird. The picture on the screen is from the community center, the murals that we have in our museum. And the man climbing the tree is our education director, Tony DeFada. And yes, he does own that purple bear costume. And he's also borrowed some gloves from me, so just an example of, you know,
I love it.
Having a little fun with the situation. And we've had a really good response from our visitors. I think they really enjoy, you know, getting to know the individuals who are working with the collection, and they feel much more comfortable contacting us about questions or really forming those relationships that are going to lead to fundraising. And we're going to need donations from all of those people, you know, in the very near future. So it's been a good thing for us.
That's hilarious. Lindsay or Kim, do you have anything to add in there?
Well, we had talked about, and kind of jumping off of the mask situation and requiring people to wear masks, we had talked about how it could be fun to encourage people, if you have the ability to make a mask that has like bottom half of a piece or somebody's face from a thing or an animal, something could be funny and fun and like actually encourage people to want to pick the thing up and wear it around, as opposed to being intimidated by it or not knowing whether they should or shouldn't. Or, you know, I think it is a good idea to make that a rule that you have to wear the mask, but maybe it can be fun and less scary looking to bring a little humor in.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
So I haven't been part of this party, but that's something I'm actually working on doing. I'm working on some designs of different like Cheshire Cat and teeth masks that I want to have printed by Spoonflower and then stitch them into masks.
Oh, that's great.
Thanks, Kashka. Well, Kim, do you have anything to add to that?
Just on digital content, I participated in a singing telegram delivery by an artist out of Grand Central Art Center in Santa Ana. It was lovely. I thought that was really fun. And my museum sent out posters, like printable posters that said, we will meet again, and encourage people to put it in their window, like print it out. And they were also coloring sheets. One idea that I did have that I've been meaning to ask them for is to make a Facebook band, like format it for Facebook so that I could actually upload it to my Facebook. And I think that people like the Facebook frames and anything that's sort of like, that they can brand themselves with, like, not brand themselves, but, you know, like link themselves to their personal institution. I think someone had mentioned offering for iPads, stylus that was branded with the institution. I thought that was a really great idea. And yeah, I think awesome, guys.
Awesome, thank you. Well, does anybody have any questions that they want to ask that are too big to put in the chat box?
All right, I'm just looking over the chat box right now. Someone had said or thought there was a problem with ADA and masks. Is that unresolved yet, whether or not it is required?
This is something that I heard Michelle Schulte talking about in the webinar. Was that yesterday or the day before? I never know what day it is. Zinnia, do you have that ADA guide? She posted an ADA guideline in the chat box and was talking about how people with hearing impairments are required. They have to be able to see people's mouths.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know what we can do is everybody who registered for this particular Zoom, we have the registration list, so we can email out that additional information. I know it's running together right now, but I remember there was very specific, and the educators meet every Tuesday on Zoom at 3. And there's usually about 85, 100 people on those calls as well, but we'll send out that information. I've also been copying the chat, and so we can send that out also to the registration list. So some of the information that was in here, if you missed it, I know it's hard to keep up with the chat when it goes all the way up to the top, but we'll get it back out. That's one of the things I'm going to be working on, is really trying to consolidate all the information that comes out of these really great conversations. We're right about at 4 o'clock. Are there any other questions for our really awesome speakers?
Cool. Well, thank you all for coming. I was really excited to share what we've been talking about internally as exhibit staff and people that work in spaces. And I will put together some information. I'm happy to share any of the documents that I've been working on, and I'll put together some stuff about the soundscape for y'all. Be safe.
Yep, thank you all for coming, and I'll just put my usual weekly plug. Every Friday at 5 o'clock Eastern, we have an SEMC happy hour. It's just another Zoom meetup. It's very much like this. There's anywhere from 10 to 40 people on there, just having a drink and ending your week and seeing your friends. There's no program to it. It's just a way to end the week with the SEMC friends. So thank you all for being here. If you're not a member of SEMC, we are running a special right now for the next 2 months. It's $25 to join for the entire year. And just to reiterate, if you are a member and your membership has lapsed, we're doing a 3-month grace period. So just, that's not something you should worry about. If you want to be a member of SEMC, we want you to be a member. So I put some information in the chat about the code to get the $25 rate, but please email me. My new email is in there. It's live as of now, and there's already lots of stuff streaming into it. So I'm really excited to continue to work with all of you. I don't know about everybody else, but all of these Zooms, especially when we do the SEMC ones, it's so inspirational what everybody is doing and how much effort and professionalism is going into all the thoughts for reopening. And today was really interesting about the interactives and just different aspects that a very specific group in the museum is thinking about, and it's part of the future. So thank you to all of our speakers. You guys were great. Really appreciate it. And if you have future Zoom ideas for a meetup, let me know, and we're happy to facilitate a meeting like this. Okay. All right. Bye, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
SEMC for life.
What?
SEMC for life.